Hello. Hi. It's Alexa Hampton, and this is 52 Weeks of Design Live. And today we are going to go live with Ralph Mackin of Mackin Architects. And here we'll go. Hello from Texas. Yum. I love lunch. Hi, Ralph.
Hey, Alexa.
How are you?
How are you?
I am so glad to have some time to talk to you in this totally comfortable, nothing weird about this way.
Yeah. It's cool. A little different from our last project, right? Hanging out.
Yeah, this is not how Ralph and I usually speak. But speak we have. We have worked on, I don't know how many houses together. And it's been over a decade.
Yes, it's
Been like 15 maybe?
We started in the Hamptons in Quag. That was a long time ago. That was almost when, yeah, boy, that was weird just starting out almost. It's been way past 10 years.
Yeah. It's been a long time. And I have to say, what could be more fun than being able to have fun as a team on a project? And I think we have always had a really nice time.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's never. That's what we love about you, Alexa. You're yourself. You make it fun. You always make us laugh. I mean, even when we're getting serious, you crack a joke, and we're like, okay.
Sorry. I like a little levity, but I also, when we work together, you're a very generous partner, and you make everybody in the room feel a part of the process, which is, I think, a thrill for all of us because it's very indulgent of you, or indulging.
Indulging, right?
Yeah, indulging.
I think that that's our business, though, right? I mean, we're creators, but we're creating something that they're going to live in. You know, this is so. It's an interesting artwork that we're in here that people live in our sculptures. You know,
Yeah, totally.
So as we create it, you have to involve them. You know, it's like it's part of the process. You have to.
No, and I mean, of course you involve them, but I think what you do is a little more than that. I think you treat everyone in the room like we are equals to you, which is not, you know, we're not architects, you're the architect, but you make us feel included in that regard. And so we're all buying in.
I get
We're all totally invested, and we're so excited to watch you as you develop. And I think that's probably true of your colleagues at your office, as well as my colleagues at my office. We all feel like, wow, he's letting us in, he's embracing us in this process, and that's great.
Well, I think I understand what you're saying, and you're right. That I do look at architecture as a team approach. I really believe that everybody can add to it, and if you cut people or you just limit what they say, then you're not listening. And you always find an idea when somebody looks at your idea and you say, well, that's great, Ralph, but what if we took it to here?
Had no walls.
You know, right? It's cool. So it's really, I love team approach. And, you know, you have to have a person who generates the idea. That's, you know, it's me. We generate the concept, and then it's your team around you. Look, I mean, we're building things, right? So you and I are the you know, the creative behind it, but everything we do is going to be lived in and built, right? So I'm by my bird feeder. So you
Are you in?
Yeah, it's a blue jay. Is pretty angry at me right now. You can leave, okay? Thank you. You know, thank you. He's gone. But it's funny. I'm on my porch. Well, just before we started, the lawn guys just finished next door, so that was like so close. So close. But you know, I think that what I was saying is that's just it's such a team, and because these things are being built, it continues after you and I do the creations. We have to plan for it, but then we're going under construction, right? Yeah. And then you have all these tradesmen who are really good at what they do, and so they're part of the team now. So you, as an architect or a designer, you have to be able to talk to everybody. You know, you have to be able to interface with the designer, interface with the owner in the beginning. And then as we travel through the project, it's not just the contractor, it's all the tradesmen on the job. So, you know, you're sitting there, you're talking to the mason, and they have their comments on what you're going to create, and said, what if we do it like this? And you listen, because they make us better. You know, they do it every day, you know, and they're always like, what if you did this, Ralph? I mean, I know what you want, but if we did, and they introduce a different look, and you say, you know, I like that. And so I think that's what's fun about what we do, that it's a continuing, we're working with artisans all the way through, you know, and then we end up with you guys.
And it's as practical and real life at the same time.
It's real. Yeah, it's very real. And we're together for years. You know, like on the project we just finished, was that was a big project. A lot of wetlands approvals, environmental, it was a big project. And so it was this just long process with all sorts of other professionals we had to deal with, landscape architects, engineers. Then we got, you know, the contractors involved, and you were involved very early on. And it was just this long, and you really get to know everybody on the team so well. I mean, their personal lives and everything is just going on. And then ultimately, we're all on the same goal: deliver to the owner what their dream is, what they wanted, right? Yeah. You know, so that's the whole thing, is you're always focused on, you know, that you're really creating something for them. And we're all going to leave. You know, we're on to the next project.
Though I refuse to leave our last project. I'm going to just wander around it.
Yeah, no, it was a nice one.
Where did you go to school, and did you study architecture first? Did you always know you wanted to be an architect?
Yes, that's a good question. I was always a creative kid. I like painting. I love music. I write things like that. And but I love to build things, you know. And I like the built world. And so I really thought that architecture was something I wanted to do. It was either that or I was going to become a rock star. So, yeah.
I mean, it's tough.
One of the two. So I went into architecture school. I did know that's what I wanted to do. Ever since I was young, I just loved architecture. You know, there's just something about it.
You're a rock star to me.
What?
You're a rock star to me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. There you go. See, that's it. I did it. I made it. But I think that, you know, yeah, I went to school for it at Catholic University in Washington, D.C. And
And where are you from?
I'm from Westchester County, North Salem, which is upstate, you know, New York, you know, upper metropolitan area. But I'm still in the metropolitan area, like right on the edge. Yeah. But we're there. And we're still there with our office, which is the town kind of grew up around us. I mean, where we grew up when I was there was very rural. Most of the equestrian farms were actually Black Angus and cattle farms. Yeah, we used to drive on the bus. You'd see those little black cattle out there, you know. And now you drive, you know, the kids driving the bus now, you'll see old horses, thoroughbred horses. So it kind of grew up around us. And this area, you know, really just, there was a demand for really good architecture, and I was able to stay. And I was able to build my practice in an area that I grew up.
It's really a very cool place, and it has a lot of great architectural precedent.
It does. I think you're right. And, you know, and history, right? I mean, look at the Hudson Valley, the historic architecture, you know, from all those great architects, you know, from the turn of the century. They're all there along the Hudson, these big estates, and in New York City. So we're right on the outskirts of that, and I was surrounded by that. And, you know, in our areas, there were rural estates and giant farms, and you just absorb all that, you know. And also, I was influenced because I grew up in a development house. I grew up in a raised ranch, you know, and I had house envy, you know, my friend. So, you know, driving the bus or riding my bike, I remember playing in old barns and being on those estates, and just, you know, you smell it and it just gets into your blood. And that's how I approach design. I mean, I just feel like you're just creating a feeling, you know. For example, if I go on vacation and I'm on the coast, you think, oh well, I'm on the coast. I love the seaside. But for me, it's not only that. It has to be the environment too, the architecture, and like an old New England village or Victorian or something. There's history there. So for me, it's everything.
Yeah, it's a context. It's not a disembodied location with no culture attendant. Were your parents encouraging of this desire of yours?
Yes, they loved it. They were really great. My parents are very supportive. I had great parents. And it's great. There, my office was in my dad's office. He's an attorney, and I rented space above him in an old Victorian.
Great.
And now it's ours. But the thing is, it was just so cool to watch. Now that I have a son who's 23, watching him start. So you really love to, I can see now what they were watching me evolve into.
Is your son interested?
No, not at all.
Okay, well,
not at all. He's going to be in marketing. He doesn't want anything to do with my business.
Okay, so I would love to talk about the process.
Okay.
It would, what better way to talk about it than to discuss a project that you and I have just worked on.
Sure.
It started 5 years ago?
Yes, let's think about that. 14?
6? 5?
15, I think 2016, maybe you're right, around that. 2016, 2015, I think we got the inquiry. And then we walked some properties with him. He was actually looking originally to renovate a property. Mm-hmm. And then this.
And this is a very smart couple, very cerebral, very thoughtful about the. Ooh, what was that? And no hasty decisions, very considered, and really rigorously entertained. Entertaining ideas.
Agreed. Everything was well thought out, and he was very, into classic architecture. Mm-hmm. He flew me out, to see the Edsel Ford House in mm-hmm. Detroit, and we went and saw that. It was just, I love that. You walk through and you can just feel it and smell it. It's It's classic, and he loves that. And so we really knew where we were headed with
Who was it? What is that? Sorry.
Excuse me.
It keeps. Who was the architect on the Edsel Ford House?
Oh, okay. I remember now. Sorry. I know, but it's not there right now. It's too
Don't
deep.
worry.
I'd have to bring it out.
So some of the influences from which you were pulling inspiration were Lindbergh and Cotswold. Yeah. Cotswold.
Yeah, Cotswold. It was definitely Harry Lindbergh was one of the guys we really tagged a lot of pictures on his books. I mentioned that in one of the questions you said that that he what books I would take with me, and I had like a ton, but he was one of them. And he for that house, yes, we definitely were looking at him. And Lutchins too. Lutchins was a little more Cotswold. I think we ended up going more toward like a neoclassical, an inspired design. Instead of trying to imitate one style, we were inspired by Normandies, we were inspired by stone mansions, Elizabethan architecture, mm-hmm. and then we kind of combined that all to create this theme that we created together of slate and stone and what the client wanted.
And by the way, somebody said, Gino says Albert Kahn Jensen did the Ford House.
Thank you.
So yeah. So that was the call to arms. That was the design brief, to look at those precedents and to reinvigorate them for the way our clients wanted to live. And there were some really cool, just interesting, Jensen, interesting things that they really cared about. They really cared about their windows. They really cared about acoustics.
Yes.
Air conditioning was a major player. Full blackout. Traveling noise from one room to the next. I enjoyed these practical concerns that ended up being very discussed on this job, because they need not be ignored. All of those things can absolutely, that's all part of how a house is built, right? Yeah,
definitely. They really wanted, you're right, it was very unique things to them. Mm-hmm. And so building that into the structure. So you're right, it's really wrapping, the the concept of the look around, you know, these particular ideas that they had of the way they were going to live. And it was very, very early on, we had to integrate all those thoughts. Even the way we designed rooms about noise travel and sound and mechanicals, you know, the way we did the kitchen had to be more closed off because of the, you know, the sounds and the smells and things like that. We can handle some of that with HVAC, but a lot of that had to be incorporated into design too. So we tried to be as open as we could, but at the same time, we had to isolate certain areas for, you know, sound travel and things like that. So it was very interesting, and it was very involved. There was a lot of consultants, right? Good balance.
Yeah, and it's, you know, when you have certain directives, you need those, you know, whatever expert opinion can weigh in. And there were some elements that had a feng shui undercurrent. For example, and this is something I talk about a lot with architects about, like, do you want to tease when you walk into the house, or do you want to show it all? And we screened the view as you walked in. You walked into this incredible double height entry with limestone floors and embossed plaster walls and amazing oak elements.
Yeah.
And you walk into a hallway, but there's a wall at that hallway. So it's very much it's like walking into a parentheses. You know, you walk in and you have to pause,
Right.
and you can filter around. And I think that was a feng shui directive.
It was. No, it definitely was. I remember the client saying when we first, because I really like to see through.
So you do run that camp. Okay.
Right. So I'm in that, you know, I want to see, I don't want to show it all, but I want to know where I want you to understand the house when you walk into it. So what we did with the client is when they said, no, we can't see through the front to the back. So we did exactly what you said. We blocked it in a creative way by putting 2 openings on the sides. But then horizontally and linearly, we connected all the way down from the stair hall through the foyer, through the gallery, all the way out through the indoor pool. You can see the entire length of the house. And that's important to me, that I just feel as a person coming into the house, I do it in as many of my designs as I can, where, you know, you're looking through one and terminating it with light at either end. And it's just something that makes me feel like I'm comfortable in a house when I can understand at least not all of it, just the extent of the layout and what and then I'm okay with it, you know, because if you're in one room and you really don't know, you know, what's down there, and I want to know. So I want to just give it a glimpse of, you know, through the space. And so when we couldn't do it that way, we did it this way.
Yeah.
So we still got it.
It was very, you know, something that I'm sure you guys all discussed, but I did not hear the conversation, but just got to experience the results of it, was that when you walk in, you're also oriented in a material sense. You've got your stone, you've got the metal of the windows, you've got the oak, you've got the plaster. They're almost like your whole toolbox is evident, and you also have a great antique, and you've got, you know, wonderful triptych above it. So it lays, there is what we lost perhaps for you, in that you're not seeing everything through. You are seeing everything through in terms of, here are all of the elements you're going to see repeating out of this house.
Exactly. And it's interesting. I love the way
materials, and you know, like I'm showing you all of that.
I love the way you look at it and the way I look at it as an architect. It's funny. I see space, right? And then the details that you see. And you see it from the tactile, you know, the materials to show the house. Well, and I think of...
Is it you? So your view is of the material you walk in.
Yeah, I love that look, though, because you're exactly right. You know, when you walk into that foyer, you see everything, every material.
You're going to need to know going through the house.
Right, because you saw the stone on the way in, which we bring into
the planting.
And the plant.
Insane.
Janice did a great job.
Yeah.
Janice
Martin, one of the most talented landscape architects I've seen.
She's great. And her vision is incredible. You know, you see her walking around and the wheels are going in her head. Mm-hmm. So she's really fantastic. We had a great team there. We really did. It was, I mean, the client was really great, letting, you know, bringing the right people together and listening, you know, who we wanted to work with. And he was right with it. You know, he loved you guys. We wanted to, and he was already looking into you. It was like, you know, perfect. He asked, you know, who we thought, and they were already loved your work, and it was just, they were there already. So it was great. And then we brought Janice in, and he loved, it was instant, because you could just, she has this vision for large properties. She can see like that, you know, it's a big picture, and you can really
picture project. I mean, it's that parcel of land, seeing the lake, the grounds. There's like it's my lobby calling. It was very, you know, comprehensive job.
Yeah, it was, and you know, it really was just quite an undertaking. With, we actually, what's interesting about what you bring up, you know, the complexity. I'm going backwards a little bit, but that property where the house sits was just dropped off like 18 feet.
Yeah.
So we literally moved a mountain around, you know, to make it all feel. But and then that working with you and Janice and just making it all, it just feels like it was always there, you know. But when you're creating, you know, an estate that large, you want to show that the distance is there, but you don't want to give it all away. So we sat the house in a way that on the top of the hill, so you could vignette through the over the meadow, through the trees, to see the vignette of the lake. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, the tennis court is way over there, and it's kind of really, there's little destinations on the property to go.
Attenuated.
Yeah. And that long driveway is just fantastic, isn't it?
It's funny. I just posted a house to Instagram. That's a beautiful house, but
I saw it.
I'm going to post the most sort of like knock your socks off photo. And there were one or two critical comments like, you know, this is too much, or how do people make this money? But first of all, you know, when it's somebody's life dream and they've worked their whole life and they're like, you know what, I'm going to build myself a house. You know, that was one of those. And this job was one of those. And both of them, though, I'm sure we could find, you know, images to show that might, like, somebody might faint if they saw it. The experience of this property was in no way, and I mean, the one we worked on, as well as that when you're in it, yeah, isn't gross. You know, these are for sure major houses, but they're not, you know, it was, the house was built for a family. And it was the culmination of the owner's dreams.
Agreed, totally. You're right. It's not, they can do it, but what they did is they did it right, and they did it with quality, and they did it beautiful, and they did it thoughtfully. You know, they did it for what, around their life and how they wanted to live in it, and it's very personal. And I think at the same time, it just, you know, yes, you could say that about a lot of things, but, you know, when you can do it, if you're going to do it, and you do it right, and you do it, but it's so understated. It really, it's set way back from the road. It's understated. We tried to, it just wraps themselves around, but it's, you're right. It's a dream that he's been dreaming about for years. Right. And so it's our responsibility. If you're going to do it and you're going to take on a project like this, well, you better get it right.
Yeah.
You know?
And, which I totally feel we did. And when you're in that house, it's not like, you know, crystal and fur and satin and sequins. I mean, not at all. It very much incorporates a lot of the materials on the interior that if you look out the window, you see. You know, the palette,
it does celebrate the architecture and the materials. You're absolutely right. It's very understated in some of the decor. You know, there was the furnishings, but
there's room sizes. The room sizes have a real charm to them. They're not like mega crazy rooms.
No, they're not.
You know, we do have an extremely large living room, but it's not like a barn or anything. It doesn't feel like a vast room that you tumble around like a tumbleweed.
No. Well, it's funny also, we were thinking the piano was going one end and we ended up moving things around. So, you know, mm-hmm. It was designed for a reason too. I think that it's, I think that You know, I just look at it as if it makes sense, right, and it's balanced and it's proportional to the way the client lives.
Yeah, harmony.
Then it's correct.
Mm-hmm. I do too. I
It's
totally.
not about, oh, this is if it works and they live in it, then it's right.
Yeah.
You know, it could be 3,000 square feet. It could be 10,000. It as long as it's proportionally correct for what they need, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and somebody just commented, sweet, sweet Arabelle. It's wonderful. So many people were given jobs building it and decorating it, which is, yeah, it's another great thing.
Totally.
And it was also great that we were able to get them in during, I'm sorry about the phone. It's like
Life.
It's life. Hopefully they'll give up. And that's so analog, you know, like it's an old phone. You can
Yeah, I
tell.
love that.
Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling.
It's on the wall in the kitchen.
No, they're two side by side. It's very, very low tech. But back to the project. I forget what I was saying. I'm sure it was brilliant. Oh no. The fact that we were able to get them in right in June of COVID was pretty awesome.
Yeah, and the shortages were starting to show, and the delays. Remember, we were well underway, but the delays more on your end. A lot of the furnishings and things was really hard to get.
Well, the furnishings were fine. There were some sconces that, you know, were stuck in Europe, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. You know, you cannot. Yeah. Anyway, they came, and it was fine, but yeah, I think the experience of COVID certainly is reflected by the demand in the housing industry, but the experience of a house or of a dwelling during COVID has made us all re-examine it and reevaluate it, and you know, in all of the good ways. You know, exactly. Even if your house is tiny, you know, it's your refuge, it's your home.
That extra space too. I mean, people come home now, and you know, this was being designed before that, but it became more evident during it that they had what they needed there, and they could just stay there, you know?
Yeah.
And it's such a fantastic spot. I mean, I have to say, I just love walking around that site. I mean,
Me too. You
know what's neat is you and I did 2 projects during COVID.
We did 2 COVID projects.
You did 2 COVID
sure
projects.
Did.
The other one was just like, we were under construction, and like New York, they shut down. You know, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Let us work a bit, you know, limited, but New York, that was tough for the contractor there, and we got through that one too. And you know, the owner was great. They worked with us on it, and that was a lot of fun, that project too.
Relationships,
right?
It's relationships. I'd love for you to, just for people who might watch this and not have had this experience, I would love for you, you know, the windows were such a critical element in this house, actually in both of those houses, but in this house especially. I would love for you to talk a little about that whole process. You know, because like for a layperson, thinking like, well, what's the big whoop about picking out your windows? But there's a lot of big whoop about picking out your windows.
Especially those windows.
Especially those windows.
Yeah, you know, the windows are very important depending on the style of the architecture, right? So this style of architecture, during that period, they were usually done with the metal windows. And the metal windows, you know, aesthetically, they're light. You know, they have those thin lines, those thin black lines or dark lines, and they wrap into the stone or the stucco, whatever it is that you're working on. And picking that, you know, that company and who's going to build them and their styling and how thick they are, all of that matters. It's a very, very large line item on the budget too. So you have to get it right. But, you know, you can't just pick any window company. So you already have to narrow down who makes the product you're looking for. And then you have a few of them. You have to interview them and go see their product and see if they can achieve what you want to achieve. We were very fortunate that our client was very in tune with the materials, very in tune with authenticity as much as we could get it, but also being energy efficient. And, you know, not like, you know, because we had to make them insulated glass. We couldn't do them like the old ones.
Yeah.
But the interesting part about the windows was that this company offered them in bronze. And so our client thought about it, and, you know, it would age it would last, but it would age a little. There'd be a patina to it. So instead
Mm-hmm.
of the metal black, which was just painted, it has this this bronze kind of patina. And as you look
Yeah,
at the
and
windows,
a depth and a warmth.
right, and a warmth. So it just is so neat to go back to the house and you see this effect on the bronze. The weather starts to have a little bit of an effect to it. It makes it really organic. And I really, really love that about those windows. And so, yeah, choosing things like that are sometimes the whole job. I mean,
And
everything's
weeks
important.
and
Like
weeks and months for us to figure out, to do our due diligence and to figure out, like, where did he really stand about what he wanted to do.
and stone. Remember how long it took the stone?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it was,
And we do these stone layups of, to see the shape of how they would weave together and the grout. And, you do
size.
all of these samples, huge. We did like a facade for him
Yes,
to see.
that is difficult because stone is organic and finding the stone that you like, right? So you have to find a color that works, but it can't work in just one piece. You have to look at it as a composition,
Mm-hmm.
and then the limestone matching with it, and then the color of the grout. And what's the pattern of the stones? How big are they? I remember we had the mason, Mike Cabuzzi is the mason. He is a fantastic mason on that job. And Mike was so patient with us. He kept, doing bigger sizes and smaller sizes and saying, we'd be like, okay, that's too small. And he'd do it again. Like, okay, that's too
He
big.
never threw stones at us. We did not get pelted.
And he's so patient with us. And, but that's what every artisan was on that job. They were very, and it was their input also. You have the client there. This is the look I want. We went and visited houses. We went to visit a house in Rye, antique house. And we saw that to look at the stone patterns. And I took the mason down to see that. And then we had to find a different color. Yeah. And we shopped different quarries.
And we're very concerned about not getting too cold looking, because if you make a big stone edifice, it can get really cold.
Huge concern of all of ours. Huge. We wanted that warmth, so we had to introduce stone with metal in it, a little bit of rust. So you got that, that little bit of orange and brown coming through. And then matching the grout to that. You don't want the grout lines to disappear because then it looks monolithic. So you don't want it too light because then it starts looking, like a different type of architecture.
Right.
So you had that, but you're absolutely right. That house is entirely stone. It's stone, and then the roof is slate. Mm-hmm. So the way I think we did it was by texture. We found this company out of Vermont, this quarry, and they were very thick graduated slate, very thick. And it also, again, has a little bit of rust in it, a little metal. So there's a little bit of brown modeling on the roof. And that gives texture, and you need that.
That variation gives it some motion.
You have to have that, otherwise, and you're absolutely right. And then the windows, the fine line black, but they're just a little bit textured because of the bronze. It was just great. And the only piece of wood on the whole front of the house was the door.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful door.
The big oak.
Once upon a time, somebody defined to me a modern day traditional house, maybe it was you, is a traditional house but with bigger windows.
Yes. So, the conversation we had, yes.
So, I don't remember anything. I'm like, was it you? Who was it? Was it my mother? No.
I know I've said it because I believe it. Yeah. So it could have been me.
And what's so interesting when you look at a house that is traditionally inspired and you drive up to it, there is the concern. They're twin opposite concerns, like, the Roman god Janus. On the one hand, you want it to look antique, but not, not old and you want it to be of the present, but traditional. But then you don't want it to look inauthentic and new, like a McMansion. So it's like, you don't want it too new. You don't want it too old. And somehow, even though our windows are so big, and they're not so big disproportionately, but they're bigger than a house built in the original era of the house that we were building.
Absolutely.
It still has a real timelessness to it, and that's no small feat, because that is the tell, right? That's where you give it up, through the window size.
You're
So
right. It's a little of everything, Alexei. What it is that what you mentioned there that you noticed that is really great. It's a great point you brought, because that's something that we stress on as architects that are referencing historical structures, but we want them to live, the way we live today, modern, open, and let light. And light is so important. So you're right. We walk into these older, beautiful residences, but, sometimes due to limitations of window side, where, the windows are smaller. It just was the way it was. And also to keep heat in the way they thought, and now we're let the light in, but how do you do that? And then that's the balance. That's the proportion.
It really is. It is.
It really is. And it also, but it's not only the windows, Alexa, it's also your heights and your roof lines. For example, when you look at a traditional, say you're going to do an Adams colonial, okay, and you're going to do a traditional one, and you see a lot of, colonials built, by spec builders, and people just bang up colonials,
Well, that's like colonial with a K.
Yeah. Right.
Colonial.
Colonial, right. Exactly. So the point is that's what they call them. But the point is, in reality, we've done a few classic Georgians and classic Adams colonials. The way you do it is you really have to, because we like higher ceilings now. In reality, they were trying to conserve heat in a lot of these houses. Not the turn of the century, neoclassical reproductions of colonials. I'm talking about the originals. And if you're going back to the 1840s and even, the 1700s, things like, there was lower ceilings for heat, right? For limitations of lengths of lumber, they were timber framed. And you want to recreate that. And when you go to today and the client would, with like 9.5 or 10-foot ceilings and things like this, and you start stacking that up. So what happens to create the proportion? You stretch the windows, right, to make the proportion. But when you get to that top floor, with our structure and the way we do things today, we don't have floor joists that are this wide anymore. They're like this. Yeah. So you have to, what we do in our architecture is you actually cheat down the roof line, through the floor, and give it that view in the front that it's all proportional. The distance between the frieze board, the upper, crown on the window, the dimensions between the windows, all have to have the same proportion and balance as a classic one from 1840.
Find more of the interior elevation with window when you're in the room.
Yes.
But from the outside, it appears as though the floor descends further down.
Exactly right. And it also has the proportions when you look at an old 1840s or 1860s colonial picture, and then you look, it's the same proportions. And then it works. Because when it comes down to it, a lot of our clients that are building new don't want an 8-foot ceiling. They want the 9s and the 10s, right?
Oh.
So you have to make it look right.
P.S. We're all much taller.
Right. So when you look at some of the reproduction, and what's really cool is in the early 1900s, after we got through through the Gilded Age, when we did all the massive shingle styles and beautiful houses, and all these houses were blending, architects were building all sorts of houses. I've run into, when I've had to renovate houses that were built in the 20s and the 30s, but were in more of a colonial style, but they were built then. What I saw, you see the slenderness and some of those elements that they picked up in the Victorian era were all started to get filtered into that architecture.
Like what?
Like, for example, when you look at columns, they were longer and taller, and they were a little bit thinner, and things were finer, and window panes and door jambs were a little bit thinner. Everything was a little more vertical.
Church architecture, where it's all about getting more light in.
Exactly. So you found when they reproduced the colonials on some of these houses I've worked in Lower Westchester in our area that were built during that period. But these were architects that had also been working on, Victorians and shingle styles and all sorts of architecture blends. Mm-hmm. What was coming out on the other end was, it was interesting. You could just tell that it was a 1920s something or 1930s reproduction colonial, but the French doors, the ceilings were 10 feet and the French doors were fine and elegant, and it just, but yet it's a colonial. And so I've run into that a lot, and I just think that's so neat how the architecture kind of evolved to what they had been building and worked from the same architects. These architects were very well known in that time, and you see what they would do with a colonial. It was just really cool, and how they would refine those details. you know, I've lucky to work on a few of those.
Who are some of your favorite architects throughout history, and anywhere, anyhow?
Well, it's kind of like with my art. What I appreciate, I really do like some of the American architects. I mean, I don't know why I follow it. Maybe it's because it's how I was influenced growing up here. That's what I saw. You know, Mackin and White, obviously, Stanford White. I mean, it's just fantastic. I mean, I still look at those books. You know, who can't? And Mott Schmidt.
Love me, my Mott B. Schmidt.
Yeah, Mott Schmidt. I mean, you know, I've studied his work. Charles Platt. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you know, Frank Lloyd Wright, the original. I mean, God, you know, he's just iconic. Frank, I like a lot. You know, he just was really innovative in what he did and everything. But those are, you know, the architects that I was influenced. And of course, I love what Mies van der Rohe did, you know, glass houses and the linearness and Corbu. Mies definitely with his, the lightness of the fenestration and then the linear lines. You know, we've gotten the opportunity lately, which is so fantastic, to do more modern architecture. You know, we're getting that opportunity. And again, because
how business now is that.
Yes, how much of my business is that? I'm finding it's becoming more and more. We're still, you know, because of our website and the work we've worked on and being around, you know, 29 years now. It'll be 30 years next year. You know, we've been doing a lot. We've been through a lot of phases of architecture. So we're known for our shingle styles. We're known for our classic architecture, but also because we're experienced, people have given us shots at some modern stuff. And I would say it's growing. It's probably, I would say modern themes are working more even into our classical architecture more than they were before. But I would say as far as more,
how so?
I just think that because there's so much of it out there now and so much light.
Is it eking into your traditional housing?
How was it?
Yeah.
I would say
interiors.
Interiors. For example, I just finished a house for a client, which was a 1927 Colonial that they bought. And we just streamlined it on the outside, like all, you know, we left the cornices, left it, but inside on one half of the house where the indoor pool is and the old.
A lot of indoor pools these days.
Yes, there's been a lot of them. That one was existing. We were renovating that one. But this one, we basically took this whole, it's ultra modern. I mean, we took a wall out between the kitchen and family room, the entire wall. It's got to be 20 something, 30 feet, all glass. And so inside this house that looks like a shell of a classic. So that's what I mean. It's working itself. You know, we have a metal front door instead of a big oak door. We have a metal front door. And you walk in and it's just, we took the moldings off and it's just plaster and light floors and you know, minimalist cabinetry and waterfall edges and white. And we're finding that more and more and more in our interior design. That you have the classic architecture, a little bit streamlined, and then inside is just, you know, really crisp.
That's an interesting way also to deal with communities that rely upon some similitude from one house to the next. So you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. Have the suggestion of conformity on the outside with your neighborhood, and then to kind of put it on its head once you're through the front door.
I think that's really cool. And I think we've always kind of leaned that way. Like we even, you know, like we said, you know, making our houses modern, our architect more modern, the way we live today. So we've already were moving toward that through the 90s and early 2000s, where we still had the trim, but we were taking walls out and combining spaces where living rooms were becoming, you know, less popular. We were just big great rooms and away rooms like a den.
Great room, isn't that a living room just by another name?
Exactly, but it's more open, like open to the kitchen.
Ended as
you're right, the great room, right? And but you never let go of the away room, that little den or study somewhere, you know, where, because if the kids are in there, you know, you have your kids in the family, they're watching a loud movie or watching Barney or something, you know, and the kitchen and the kitchen's filled. You need a place to take a call or just maybe read. You always have to have that other space. So it was almost like the living room didn't disappear; it just became smaller and moved over, and then the family area, the living room formal, the old den became bigger, like the size of a living room. So we were already working these
volume conversation.
Exactly. It's just a change of volume, though, right? I mean,
yeah.
It was like, remember the living room, right? The living room was a big room, and your den that you were at your grandma's house was a little TV room, with the couch pushed up against the wall, and you're watching television. There wasn't a television in the living room, you know, it was none of that. And now,
none of that
it was not allowed. And so now, when you look at it, it's just we just connected the living room to the kitchen, and it just becomes one big space. But we still need that other room, you know. But now we use differently. That's all.
Well, and because of COVID, there's been much talk, a lot of it from me, about needing rooms with doors, and desks. You know that I doubt you've seen Mean Girls. Have you seen Mean Girls?
No.
So there's a joke about this girl who's constantly saying the word fetch, and her friends are like, "It's not going to happen. We know you're trying to make fetch happen, but it's not happening." So I kind of felt fetchy going around being like, we need doors, we need doors, we need walls, like trying to make it happen. But then COVID made it happen.
COVID made it happen, yes.
COVID made it happen. But still our volumes have changed radically. And so some of you were saying about the roof lines too, like, you know, your massing at any kind of house has to it has to move up and down and in and out so that it doesn't look like some god-awful. I mean, they must be driving each other. Your desire to have the roof lines be a certain way, and also this reconfiguration of the interior volumes.
Well, it is. It depends. I think that would depend on the architecture, right? So like a Victorian or a shingle style is an asymmetrical house, right? So it's symmetry with an asymmetry. So those are the easier houses to handle the volume with.
Right. Because you're not better.
I'll just put a dormer here. That'll balance it out, you know. That'll give me more room there. Let's sweep this roof. Let's wrap a porch around it. You know, that's a very free style of architecture, which is why a lot of architects and owners love the shingle and Victorian style. You could just, you know, you can make it work. It's very asymmetrical. As long as you can get that balance, it's going to work. And then when you get into more traditional architecture, like a Georgian, you know, where it's very balanced. So that is where the challenge comes as the house becomes bigger. So what we would do is we try to make the center section more proportional, and then we add wings. So it's like a rambling farmhouse or a rambling Georgian. So that helps you with your roof lines, to answer your question.
I was on a tour with the ICAA, and we were in Ireland, and you know, we were at a house with a major central element, and then these bracketing areas that they called dependencies.
Oh, cool.
Just such a great word for these, you know, these two arcades on either side of the house terminating in rooms. Dependencies. So it's kind of like what you're contending with when you have to do that.
Exactly right. And it's interesting. You had that question. Somebody had asked about the side of that house. That's one of the houses I did that on. That house, they thought it was a folly or a pool house. That was actually the side of a
Okay, good. Yes.
That was the side of a Georgian. So it's a side view of a Georgian.
So neither pavilion nor folly.
It's a house.
It is the attenuation of the center mass.
Exactly right. It's the side of the house where the main center stone part of the Georgian is behind it. So there's a lot of house behind that view. But it's done in a way that's proportional. So you have a section, then a courtyard. We did it so the house doesn't look as large. It's still large, but it's not.
Or grotesque.
Right, it looks proportional.
Yeah.
But that side view is one of my favorite views. I just love that view. I remember staying there with the photographer, saying, "I have to take this shot because it's this beautiful meadow."
Yeah.
And it's right to his study, the client's study. And I just remember, I walked down there, and I walked him down with this camera. That was when we were using cameras, right?
Right.
And he walks down, and I said, "Look," and he's like, "Oh my God!" You know, it was just so we took it in the day, we took it in dusk, we took like 20 pictures, and that was my favorite one. It's just the light was right, and just the way it's slender, but it has those dependencies on the side. Those two little arch porches that kind of break the scale up.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's an important comment. One of the things that also that would tie into what you said, I mentioned it quickly, but porches are important to me in architecture. If you, even in classic art, you know, if a Georgian, you can work them in on the sides. And that's what I did here. I just feel like porches help give scale and a transition. They're almost a human scale.
Outside to inside.
It's a human scale, right? I mean, think about it as you're right, even from inside to outside, Alexa, where, you know, you walk out, like I'm sitting on a porch now, it's this transition point, you know, like the outside is so vast. I mean, it's just, right? And
it's you're aimed outdoor space.
Exactly. And I think it's so nice to transition from your indoor to semi-indoors. You know, you have the scale, you have proportion, but I mean, you have the shelter, but you're wide open on the sides. And I just think, so from the outside, it gives it scale and human scale, where you feel as you're walking up to it, you're addressed by the lower roof. And as you're living on it and going outside, it offers that transition point.
Yeah, I love, you know, I love words. I love metaphors about words. And whenever I think of things like that, I think of it as a declension. So, you know, here's the sentence and the verbs, and now you're the declension of the verb as it goes out on each side. Talk to me about your artwork, because, you know, you mentioned how much it informs you. What medium? What's going on?
Watercolor.
Really?
Yes, I love watercolor. It's how I like to. Really, what I'm doing is I'm drawing, and watercolor is the accent. So I don't create I paint. I create a sketch. I like to mostly do scenes in architecture. That's why I really love like Edward Hopper. You know, he you know, did a lot of architectural elements all through New England and things, and then there's Winslow Homer, who did, you know, a lot of sites.
Give me any watercolor vibes. That I think of, like, you know, dense fields of oil.
No, yeah, I don't. I love the light, and I think what it is, I was just asked this question by one of our kids, because I was painting when we were out on vacation, and I said it's really a drawing. I rely on my drawing, so I was creating a scene and I was drawing it, and then the watercolor is just like the colors, the tones, the accent to me. So really, I would say more of my medium is I draw, but I color with the watercolor, you know.
Okay, so somebody had been asking before, and this is a great way to weave it in, about your architecture and how you're discussing, hold on, let me get the exact, how does lighting play a role in your architectural space? And I would assume, given that you're a watercolorist, you know, watercolor is all about light and leaving space for the light, or taking it and removing it. Do you have the same, not sensation, but how do you contend with light, and do you contend with it in the way that you do when you're painting?
Yes, that's a very good point. I would say yes, I do. When you're creating a painting, you have to start
knowing where the light is.
You cannot add the light.
You cannot.
Only in oils.
They're so hard.
So that's exactly what it's like when you're creating it with architecture. You have to think of it first, because trying to put a window in later doesn't always work. So you really have to think about where the sun is.
Unless you're in the 1400s in Florence, and then you're an adorable cutout window.
Yes, then you're like a little, with a little shutter on it, right? Yeah. But so I think that it's really about knowing the site. Where's the light coming from? How does it reflect into the house? What are the views? And working that right into your design. So light is actually part of the creation right out of the gate. It's, you know, where am I looking, and then orienting those spaces around the light. And I think about that all the time. Do I want morning kitchen light, or what does the client want? I really love sun in my kitchen in the morning. Well, then we got to go like this.
With an electrical plan. Like, if you're orienting the house to capture the light as it travels through the day, or, you know, as it travels into one room and out the next at certain moments during the day, how do you think about the integration of a lighting system to support those choices?
That's definitely, you know, what's interesting about that's a great question. Lighting has become very complex, and lighting is very, very discussed now very early on. And how are we going to work the lights into this room? What will they look like? And where do we put them? And really lighting systems and lighting design is actually become its own thing now. And so when we can get a lighting consultant involved with our ideas, we love it. It's now, and so I would say that it's really paramount. You really need to understand where the light isn't, and then lighting the other walls in the room to balance out the brightness on one side is so important. And also making it, so minimalist, where you don't really notice it. Mm-hmm. And that's what really great lighting does. But I have to say, lighting systems, Lutron type systems are really
increasing.
Yeah, they're so important in almost every house now. And I know it used to be like, oh, I don't need that. It's too much, and they're complicated sometimes. If you don't overcomplicate it and you simplify it, but it has made lighting easier for architects.
That's interesting.
I think it has made it easier for us to light rooms because we have more options now. I can set different tones for a room and evening room, and but it's very important. It was a great question. I saw it come up. You have to think about that. It's not your first thought. It's more as the house evolves. First thoughts are natural light.
Yeah, it's really okay. This is where obviously you're an architect and I'm a decorator, because you just said something that makes so much sense. Of course, it's how do you compensate in a room, knowing where the natural light is, how do you offset it and compensate? Yes. Which is, of course, not at all how I think about it, because I'm not really thinking about I should, and I will henceforth, but I'm thinking about it, I see it, I'm not seeing it 3D when I'm considering it. When I'm doing an electrical plan or thinking about my portion of the electrical plan, I'm looking at a floor plan. So right, I'm looking down and I'm looking at the pieces of furniture, and it's much more, it's much flatter. It's not the experience of light in total. It is, okay, I don't want that shining on the coffee table. Or, okay, I want that light on the wall. Where do we put it so that the light doesn't scallop? Or where do we put it so you're not staring into a light bulb? So it's a much less of a total experience of light. It's more, item by item.
Well, that's probably what the majority of it, Alexa, but you also have to think about how you use the light during the day. And that's what never.
No, I think what you're saying is, of course, perfect sense. It's a philosophical understanding of the entirety of the space.
And that's the Lutron system. See, before we'd have to have two switches for that. Now you could say, program these two to go on lighter than those two. Or I really need these interior lights to go on when it's a beautiful bright day. I don't need it on the outside of my house. Yeah. And so you just hit the daylighting button. And it's just incredible how it's opened up. And I actually learned about that by reading about that. And recognizing it. I was reading, investigating lighting, and started reading. I said, that was an insight from a lighting design that I picked up a while ago. And then I applied it to what we put. It was hard to apply. And that's what I mean. But the Lutron systems have made that possible now, where you can think like that during the day. Instead of I'm just turning the lights on.
Yeah, totally.
Can't see where I'm going.
It's funny, in the 52 weeks questionnaire, how many, I would say the vast majority of people, when they're answering no room should be without, I think dimmers has to be the big winner.
Oh, really?
I think everybody, that is the most popular answer.
But from an architect, it was different. I don't think like that, right? When you asked me about fabrics, I was like,
you're like, I don't care.
Yeah, I don't care. Denim and khaki.
Yeah, you're like sheetrock.
Like
plaster.
Colors. When you said colors, I'm like, I like natural tones, because I'm an architect. So when you said, what can a room not, I said, without natural light, because I think like an architect. And as an interior designer, you think a little bit different.
Yeah, a little bit differently. Yeah, it's also, when it comes to lighting, the expectation of the homeowner now, or I assume this to be so as the years pass by, and people are, we're all much more fluent in the uses of our phones. The expectation of our clients is these young people are now aging and doing stuff, or as they get older, they will absolutely require that everything be in their palm.
Oh, yeah.
Like our clients now who are older are sort of like exhausted by all of the things they've had to learn. And they're like, please simplify it. Give me an on and off button. But that generation is going out. And the generation that's coming in to take its place absolutely wants to have that, you know, to be in their car, setting everything up in the house before they get there.
Oh yeah. And you know, when's the last time you saw your kid get in the car and listen to anything that was on the radio?
Radio? Yeah.
They plug it right into their phone, and you Bluetooth, and that's what you're listening to. Everything, you're exactly right. It's the same thing with lighting, you know, everything. It's coming right from the phone, speakers, whatever it is.
And I think for the past 10 years, lighting has been more advanced than the homeowner for the most part. And it's been a chore for the homeowner and for the decorator to understand it all. But those days are finite.
They're finite because you have to, you know, we have to adapt. LEDs made it easier also. But again,
and the quality of LEDs, the blue light versus yellow light.
Huge. And the dimmability of them, getting better at dimming with softer light, where it's just not bringing the temperature. Yeah. It's not just bringing the light down, but it's bringing the temperature down. That's the thing I've always loved about halogen and classic lighting, is when you dim them, they're golden. You know, it's that beautiful golden feel. And they're working toward that. With
incandescent, yeah.
Yeah, and getting, right, incandescent. And so the idea is that now with the LEDs, they're getting better and better at that. And that's, you know, so, but this shows that how when you start to talk about something this much, how specialties are created in our industry, right?
Yeah.
So how you have, you know, certain trades that's just what they do, are created. And so now there's a lighting, there always was, but now it's especially important for lighting and smart home consultant.
It's a very, very, yeah. It's you know, when you think of, sorry, I'm like all over the place. When you think about people who go to the hospital and they're sick, and sometimes it's hard to get the global view because they're bebopping from specialist to specialist to specialist. And so this person's like, oh, get an MRI, or, oh, it's not your bones. Oh, it's not your blood. Oh, it's not blah, blah, blah. Where sometimes you need, you know, the global view, the quorum. You need the whole team together of all of those specialists who obviously all can speak to the total as well as their specialty. Because sometimes there is, not with us, I don't think. I've never been in a job where everyone is so specialized they miss the big picture. But that has to be a hazard, where it becomes almost ad hoc with specialists.
It's kind of our job, right? We're
totally,
the ones,
totally.
Because we're the conductors of all these little band members, right? And so we're just talking to everybody, and we're the interface because we were there first, and we're going to be there at the end. And so we're the guys who have to think, because it's a creation that we're well aware of. Because frankly, the lighting guy wasn't involved, or the sound guy might not have been involved in the creation of the theme, and so they might have missed something. So once in a while, we have those team meetings where we have everybody at the site or everybody on Zoom, and you have the sound guy listening to what the lighting guy is saying, listen to what the interior designer is saying, and then the sound guy says, oh, you know, what if we did this?
Where the hell is my subwoofer going?
Yes.
You know, like, I don't want a subwoofer.
Right. Or the acoustical sound guy says, oh, okay, I have another product we can use to do that. And that's, or hey, I didn't know you were putting drapes in that room. I don't need that. It absorbs the sound. And that's what happens in those team meetings, especially on this last project you and I were just talking about. We would every once in a while have the giant table meetings and have whoever it was at that time, whether it was just the tradesman or it was now the consultants, the sound consultants, the audio consultants, the interior designers, and then us, just kind of saying, all right, you know, and let's, you know, because you're going to cut holes in my ceiling. That's going to let sound through. We can't do that. So there's all this coordination that goes on behind the scenes. I've just realized this is the first time ever that I've gone over without once looking at the phone for the time. Obviously, like it's fun having this conversation with you in front of other people because, you know, it's still like a viable and interesting and lengthy conversation to have at all times. Yeah, because you never graduate out of needing to have these really long, detailed conversations about how we're philosophically approaching a house. You know, the philosophy is still very much a present day concern. Yes, you're exactly right. I mean, what goes into it is with all these, the technology that's it used to be, right? We think about when it started, it was shelter, and now it's really advanced shelter, you know, and where we've taken these with electronics and everything. And there's so much, but yet
it's shelter, it's work, it's entertainment, it's sustenance, it's now the expectations that your house can do anything and everything for you.
Right. It has to protect you. It has to be, and everything. It has to be, and you have to love it. You just have to love
And you
it.
have to love it. And that's why I'm going to bring it around here. And that's why you call Ralph Mackin.
Oh, thanks, Alexa.
So much fun talking to you. I can't wait for, I mean, we're going to go through withdrawal because we've been working side by side on these two projects for minimum 4 years.
Yeah.
So we need to immediately shackle somebody to us for the next 4 years.
Yes.
You game?
Yes, definitely. We need a new client to hire the team.
Yeah. Get the band back together.
Definitely get the band back together. No question.
Love talking to you. So much fun. You're always but I'm sure everyone now listening to you will understand what I mean about how generous you are and bringing people in, like just the way you talk and the encouragement, your verbal encouragement. It's really great. You're wonderful.
Thanks, Alexa. We love you too.
It's always a pleasure. And I will see you soon.
Yes, see you soon. Thanks so much for inviting me. Take care.
Thank you. Love you. Bye.
Bye.